Welcome back to Primary ypww, Lesson 8, Miracles, the Handwriting on the Wall. The lesson scripture is found in Daniel chapter 5, verses 1 through 8, verse 13, verses 25 through 28. Now Daniel chapter 5, verses 1 through 8 reads, Belshazzar, the king, made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords, and drank wine before the 1,000. Belshazzar, while he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives and his concubines might drink therein. Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes and his wives and his concubines drank in them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold, and of silver, and of brass, of iron, of wood, and of stone. In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand, and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another. The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. And the king spake and said to the wise men of Babylon, Whosoever shall read this writing, and show me the interpretation thereof, shall be clothed with scarlet, and have a chain of gold about his neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Then came in all the king's wise men, but they could not read the writing, nor make known to the king the interpretation thereof. Now let's read verse 13. Then was Daniel brought in before the king, and the king spake and said unto Daniel, Art thou that Daniel which art of the children of the captivity of Judah, whom the king my father brought out of Jewry? Now let's go down to the 25th verse. And this is the writing that was written, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. This is the interpretation of the thing, meaning, God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balances and art found wanting. Perez, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Now let's look at the memory verse today. The memory verse says, In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand, and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote, and that is Daniel chapter 5, verse 5. The target for today says, the Lord wants his children to know that he can also use miracles to give prophecies. The introduction says King Belshazzar was the son of King Nebuchadnezzar. He liked to have wild parties and big feasts. One day, he decided to invite 1,000 noblemen and many women to join him in one of these drunken parties. He would use the vessels of the house of God to drink from while he and the people praised their many false gods. This was a big problem. Now the next topic says, what's the problem? Belshazzar brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple. The king's princes, his wives, and servant girls drank from them. This dishonored God. While they were celebrating, a hand appeared out of nowhere. The fingers of a man's hand began to write on the wall of the king's palace. The king saw the part of the hand that wrote. It scared him so bad that his knees began to knock. He cried, Bring the astrologers, magicians, and fortune tellers to read this writing to me. But none could read the writing or understand it. Daniel was a prophet of God. He was very wise. He could read the writing. He was brought to the kingdom and interpreted the writing on the wall. He began by explaining to Belshazzar that it was God who had given his father Nebuchadnezzar the kingdom. His dad's heart had been lifted up in pride, but God brought him down and made him live like an animal. You knew what happened to your dad, but you did not humble yourself. Instead of giving glory, you dishonored God, who holds your breath in his hand. The handwriting on the wall told the king that judgment had come upon him. God has numbered the days of your kingdom. It is at the end. God weighed the balances and found you lacking. Now your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. It said, that same night the thing happened that was declared. The Bible Kid says, talk about how God used a hand to write a message on the wall to King Belshazzar. Tell why you think none throughout the kingdom but Daniel could read the language and interpret it. Next, talk about the drinking and partying lifestyle of the king and how he dishonored God. Would you use the things of the church in a bad way? Finally, talk about how King Belshazzar knew what had happened to his father, but still chose to do wrong like his dad had. How important is it to learn from the bad things that happen instead of repeating the same mistakes? The last lesson I talked about the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is life. We want to be not weary. The Bible says, be not weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not. So we want to keep doing good things, even when hard things are happening. That's called faith. Now the questions for this lesson says, how many noblemen did King Belshazzar invite to his wild party? That was question 1. Now question 2 says, from what did he use for the people to drink? Why was this wrong? Number 3 says, who could read and understand the handwriting on the wall? Name one thing it declared. I want you to go back to the lesson and reread or re-listen so that you can answer the questions. Daniel is very important in this time. Learn from Daniel. Daniel was following God. And God bless you and thank you for joining me today.